Hello there, sword friends. This is a quick vlog sword blog and more of a general questionnaire and something I'd be interested in hearing your feedback about. And it's been an idea that's rattling around in my head, but this video admittedly is spurred by somebody I was trolling a bit in the YouTube comments section that was commenting on one of my videos, and there was basically an interesting subject that again was perked, and I thought it would be a good subject for a video, good subject for people to talk about and kind of honestly share their thoughts on. So the basic gist, and it's tough for me to even articulate what it is without sounding inherently biased, because admittedly I certainly have my own thoughts on the matter, but the base question I think boils down to should anyone buy cheap, inexpensive mass production swords? And I know that most people will have an opinion one way or the other about it, but nevertheless, there it is. Now, let me try and frame the alternative argument to mine as best I can, and if you think I've left anything out, please chime in the comments below, because I think the argument certainly has merit, and I'd like to understand it better. But there's one side of the fence that says, hey, there are a lot of people that smith swords, perhaps even specifically in Japan, that are not making a lot of money doing it, and frankly hungry for work, hungry for a market. The market is small when the barrier to entry for a sword is $2,000 or perhaps more. That might even be on the low end. But it could be said that if you bought 10-ish mass production swords out of China, the Philippines, or wherever you have, then that money in summation could be used to pretty much pay off either a genuine antique of functional quality, or to go toward commissioning a smith to make a properly made sword with all of the bells and or whistle, well, probably not all the bells and whistles, but something made by somebody who studied, who has a craft, something of quality and merit. So but the people that are making those things right now struggle to have a market. A lot of the swordsmiths and blade makers out there certainly don't do it because they're going to find financial success. Some certainly do, but I would say it's likely a rarity, and the people that do, very likely are going to have difficulty finding monetary success in their craft. And if they find some, great, I hope they do, but at the same time, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to study, to understand, to build your capability, your craft, to build a name for yourself, to build a business, to find clients. I mean, that's a very challenging thing to do, and to find success with it even more challenging. So the community of people that are doing this now struggle and likely have to either have different jobs or have a lot of difficulty doing and pursuing that love full time. And if the Chinese swords and mass production swords did not exist in their current capacity, would the market be a lot larger? Would those people be more fruitful than they are? And so to that end, should the Chinese swords, should anyone buy them? Should anyone buy mass production pieces? There's also some arguments, generally people kind of brush it off as sword snobbery, but there's a lot of arguments that the mass production stuff really misses the mark in terms of what a sword should be, how it should feel, the thought behind it, the quality behind it, and there's always some horror stories about fatal defects that cause some potential harm or damage, or things that are made in such a way that it's not conducive to either collecting or studying as a martial artist. So the alternative side of the argument is that, and it's one that I currently hold, is that the Chinese swords and mass production swords in general have their place, and that is that the barrier to entry is so small that people can practice martial arts in a way that they can actually afford. They can buy an inexpensive sword, and that sword may fuel their interest to become a potential buyer or person in the market for a higher end sword, where alternatively they would simply not buy anything. And that is, I guess, kind of my personal position. I know kind of my story, and I'll get into that, but I can say with some degree of certainty that if the inexpensive cheapo swords were not available, that I would not be making these videos. I wouldn't be interested in swords. I wouldn't have a collection. I wouldn't participate in the community in the fashion that I do. And I'm not looking for a gold star. I'm not saying that I'm certainly keeping anyone's lights on, but I do buy stuff from smiths in the community. Sometimes not directly, but I contribute to the community in some small way. I have bought fittings, and I've commissioned pieces and this, that, and the other. I haven't commissioned a Shinsakudo from Japan, so to some extent, some people only think of a katana as made in Japan by a Japanese licensed smith who studies under a particular school or some such thing. And at some point, I would like to do that, but I can certainly say that that would not even be a thought in my mind if I didn't have access to inexpensive, cheaper swords. My interest in swords, personally, my story begins as a kid. Actually, I found these photos. Forgive me for taking a trip down memory lane and furthermore not scanning them. But this is like my first sword, like one that I got at a garage sale from a neighbor. Here's my cheapo Ninjato that I got. It's like a mall katana, stainless steel. What else did I have? I had machetes and this and that and the other, and I took pictures of them when I was a kid. Here's this top one here was my very first sword, a gift from an uncle, and it's a stainless steel decorative piece that said Toledo on it. And I love swords and knives, and I thought they were super cool. And here's one of me without a tooth, sitting at my cabin with all my prized collection at the time. But since I was a young kid, I've been super interested in swords, and I that cheap mall katana and various martial arts films kind of piqued my interest at a young age, and that stayed with me through my childhood and into adulthood. And the first sword I practiced with, even as an adult, was this cheap $100 piece of garbage. It was a Chinese mass production sword. I learned a lot. I banged it around. I did dumb stuff with it. But I learned quite a bit with that sword, and eventually it broke and was in pretty bad shape. And I thought to myself, I can pay my bills. I have discretionary income. I'd like to buy a nice sword. But that wouldn't have happened. I certainly would not have followed through with the martial arts and all of this and that if the barrier to entry started at, say, $2,000. There would have been no way if I didn't have the cheaper alternatives, understood that my interest and my love for the hobby was not going away, and that I could find something inexpensively, but then I kind of quickly realized what I wanted and what I liked, and that it would cost more money to get those things. And now I collect and buy and trade and do all sorts of stuff, and I commission pieces, but I wouldn't be there if it weren't for the cheap $100 mall Ninjato, right? It wouldn't be around for the cheap. I don't even have a photo of the other one that I used to practice, but the cheap piece of garbage that I used for a long time. And so to that extent, I feel I am now a buyer in the market because that cheap stuff existed. And now I buy more expensive, fancier pieces, but I wouldn't have if the cheap mass production market out of China didn't exist, or something very similar to it. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Do you think that, basically on the argument, from what I can see, there are two sides, and if I'm articulating the other correctly, is it better to have the mass production, inexpensive market removed? And does that keep people who are passionate? I mean, you can always practice martial arts with Bokken. There's a lot of alternatives, but does that keep tradition alive? Does that make the community better, or does having access to inexpensive sword-like objects encourage more people to see that the barrier to entry is smaller, to practice with a sword, to have a live blade, to feel a real sword in their hand, and then realize what they like or don't like, and buy eventually when they become a buyer to buy something better. I don't know, but I'd certainly like to know your thoughts about it. So anyway, again, if you have contrary arguments or something else to add, I know there's maybe even more than two sides to said argument, but and maybe I'm not articulating either one properly. I can only see it from my personal view, and I'm sure you have your own, and I'd like you to share. So that's the main topic of this video, and I'll pretty much leave it at that. Cheers, and thanks for watching. I think the best, no. Then I moved on to trading and participating in the community to find. The best way to explain it is, what is a katana? No, that's not the best way to describe it. Go swing it around in your backyard, figure out what you like, don't like, and then maybe your interest is I'm not formulating this question properly.